Welcome to the first episode of Coffee and Philosophy. Looks like we're running a little late. Okay, we're going to be joined with your nomad soul in just a moment here. This is our new weekly show here on MSP Ways where we're going to be talking about everything from philosophy to metaphysics, kind of whatever everyone's in the mood for along those themes. Looks like we have Breeze here, Crimson's here, Isaria, Jesse, Main Event, and Zelenik. I'm probably messing up your name, but I do apologize. Zelensik? Okay. So does anybody have any kind of suggestions that they would like us to discuss this week, or just gonna leave it up to me and Nomad Soul? Thanks, Crimson. Zelenichich. Yeah, sure thing, Codex. I am recording. Okay, Azaria. So that's a pretty good topic while we're getting Nomad Soul ready. How do we deal with anxiety?
Hello.
Hey, sorry, it's giving me feedback.
Oh shit, I know, I don't have headphones. I just jumped in your show.
That's cool. We can talk about anxiety.
Yes, do you have any suggestions?
Um, Basically, I would say you have to figure out exactly where the anxiety is coming from. Usually, like, whenever I have anxiety, it's usually more of a. It feels like a fear of rejection. It's like I'm not accepting something about myself, but usually, like, I'll project that onto others. So if I feel like I'm anxious about something, it's because I'm usually assuming that other people are going to be rejecting me for something that I'm really rejecting myself about. So, like, if I go into public and I think everyone's looking at me, it's probably because I'm looking at all of them and not really focused on myself.
That makes sense. I'm getting my headphones on.
I mean, they can come from a lot of other things too. Like, I mean, you can be anxious about money. Uh, I know a lot of people that happens where you'll start worrying about if I don't make enough money, I'm not gonna be able to pay my bills or eat or whatever. I mean, it can kind of snowball into irrational thoughts, but like normally what I'll do in those situations and what I'll try to tell people is like if you can think back, of all the times that you've been in those situations where like you have those thoughts and you just like you feel overwhelmed and anxiety is building up, you've always got through them in the past, right? So like, why would you assume this is going to be the time that it just all fucks up and you're not going to be able to get through it?
Yeah. I'm feeling massive anxiety about taking this trip to Florida, getting on a plane, leaving the cats. I just have 10 million things swirling around in my head, and it's all forming in a massive anxiety ball in my chest currently. So, as avian flu said, anxiety is being in the future, depression is being in the past. It's a good way to look at it. Crimson understands the anxiety. Yeah, we will have fun. Yeah, a pro and con list. I have lots of cons on the list. I have slight agoraphobia. So, just leaving the house in general gives me anxiety. So, I haven't taken a trip in so long.
I hear you.
Are you going to play?
Um, I'm going to do my best. I don't think there's anything that's gonna like stop me at the moment, so that's always good. But I'm one of those people that I don't really plan things because I feel like it kind of like sets expectations, and then like if they don't come to pass, then basically like I'll end up like upsetting myself for no reason. So it's kind of like I generally just make like the conscious like idea that I want to go, and if nothing comes up to stop me between now and then, I mean, like I don't have any kind of like reason why I can't go. Like, like I don't do like the normal job thing, and I don't really like need anyone's permission.
So, you're kind of like a fly by the seat of your pants.
Yes,
Oh, we're
indeed.
dropping frames. So, we're dropping frames. Is Kodak's the one doing the show right now?
Well, it looks like it's balancing out for the moment, but me and Ron had talked about this. My ISP is kind of like not really cool with streaming, so every now and then, like they'll start messing with me when I'm streaming, and like my upload speeds will just like drop to like non-usable for like a couple seconds at a time, just enough to disrupt everything.
Oh, all right. Looks like Menno's going to check it out. So, are you familiar with what avian flu is talking about? EFT?
You have to tell me what it stands for. It's
Yeah, I don't know
possible.
what
Like
it
I'm
is.
not knowing like the acronym.
Nor am I.
I mean, to me, EFT stands for electronic funds transfer.
Well, that would certainly help with my anxiety if I could have an electronic funds transfer of a huge amount into my account.
Yeah. I'll wait and see whatever avian flu says.
Yeah.
I mean, I know there's like dialectic behavioral therapy, things like that, and I know you were doing you weren't doing DBT, you were doing the other one, right?
Yeah, cognitive behavioral therapy.
Right. So it's like basically these two. Okay, so he says it stands for emotional freedom technique.
Hmm.
Um, Basically, like CBT and DBT are both kind of the same thing, but they approach everything from like a different mindset. Like DBT is more like a spiritual approach to behavioral therapy, and there's the CBT, which is like cognitive. So it kind of like goes from a, I guess like a psychology standpoint would be the best way to put it. But EFT kind of sounds like something similar. Yeah, if it's about yoga and meditation, it's pretty much always going to be about mindfulness, and that's really what I find like all three of these things are going to be about. So you've how have you been coming on your journey to mindfulness, Isaria?
Oh, it comes and goes. Some days are good. I think that the overall trying to be more aware of my negative thought patterns has improved. But some days it does happen where I, have the negative thoughts and then suddenly it cycles down to triggering negative emotions, and then I'm in a negative emotional state due to the thoughts, which is then harder to rewind out of. But if I can catch it early enough.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree. It's definitely a snowball effect, and what avian flu is saying is it kind of like focuses on what you're eating, cigarettes, things like that. And that makes sense because that's all. I would say that's part of the whole yoga thing in general. I mean, there's a lot of mindfulness. There's a lot of breathing exercises, but getting into like the health and wellness aspects, controlling what you put into your body is another way to control what you're getting out of it. Um, I tend to always focus more on the mental aspect, and I think it's really like just like what you said. It's every step, every kind of like bit of progress in that direction adds up over time, and it's not really about when you don't succeed or whenever you think like you're failing or anything like that, because there really is no failure. It's like I think about it like just if you were walking down a path or if you're like swimming across a pool or something like that. I mean, eventually you're gonna get to the other side. So it's not really about like how many times like you slow down or stop, or how many times like you have to go back and then move forward again. There's no real losing in this situation. It's not a competitive thing. It's just here's where you are, here's where you're going. Whatever happens in between there isn't really as big of a deal as you think it is. So if you don't really focus on like every little thing, like okay, well today I said something stupid to myself, or like today I was feeling like crap and kind of talking negative to myself. I mean, it doesn't really matter so much whenever those things are not the norm. What I think matters the most is whenever you're doing that more than you're doing anything else.
Yeah, it seems like I go through these phases where I'm like I'm having a hard time implementing it into my actual life. Like they seem to be categorized like, oh, today or I'm going to focus on my mental health for this hour. Like it's not working out that way. And then the rest of the time I'm at work being stressed at work, or I'm on Steam it trying to do stuff. Like I'm having a hard time implementing uh, the cognitive behavioral therapy into my everyday routine. Um, and then just looking at what avian flu is saying, I'm doing everything wrong, the coffee and the sugar.
Well, you can't really compare. you know, you can't really compare yourself to someone else. I mean, what works for one person isn't going to really work for, everyone. That's one thing that I try to always tell people, and I remind myself, we all have our own path to walk, and yeah, if even if we're all going to the same place eventually, I mean, we live, we die, we whatever you believe after that point, but nobody gets the exact same route from here to there. So we have to figure out what's going to work for us, focus on that, and really it's a journey of learning yourself and knowing yourself better. It's not just doing something that somebody else did and you think like it works for them. So, like, I just happened to stumble across DBT whenever I was like researching ways for what ultimately I guess ended up I recognize as mindfulness, but there's all kinds of different ways to go about how you get to that point. So, like some people do yoga, some people see a therapist and talk about things, and I guess ultimately this is one of the reasons why I don't really go to therapists. Is I feel like their whole point is basically just to make you question your own beliefs. And I mean, I feel like we all have to kind of be able to get to that point by ourselves. But I mean, if therapists help other people, I can't really say it's a bad thing. They just never really did anything for me. So
Yeah, it never helped me either.
right, so it's like once I accepted that therapists wanted to do nothing but basically put me on pills for depression and things like that, then I realized, like, okay, well, it's kind of up to me to solve this problem. Obviously, the pills didn't work, they just kind of made me feel like a zombie. So, if I want to get to a place where I'm not depressed all the time and, I'm not like suffering from crippling anxiety, then the only person that's going to get me there is me. So, I just kind of like started looking through different ways that people would handle anxiety, and it's definitely like what they were saying. Anxiety seems to be more worrying about the future, whereas depression seems to be more basically feeling powerless or at the mercy of the past. Like you can't really get over the mistakes you've made. You think that they define you, and you kind of like end up in this place where you're always compensating for things you did in the past. And I mean, like, I spent a long time at that point. There's a lot of things like I did that I used to just feel guilty about every day, and I would, focus on that and dwell on that. And every time somebody was like, "Oh, thank you, you're so nice, you're a good person," I'm sitting there thinking, like, you don't know me at all, like, I'm horrible. Uh, I'll steal from you the first time I get a chance, like all that kind of stuff. And it just like, it gets embedded in your mind. And even though, like, you wouldn't do that anymore, the basically, like, the habit that you formed in your brain is that you always default back to that place where you were just like at your worst, and you just know that like somehow you're going to end up back there as soon as you stop fooling yourself. And it's kind of like funny because the way to get past it is by basically just to accept that like you've done these things, and they basically, like, once you can accept that you've done something and you don't have to necessarily do it again, then you can kind of just put it to the side and it becomes like a separate person.
Yeah, I used to have issues with depression. I don't feel depressed anymore. Now it's all about the anxiety.
Right, so then what that would tell me is that you've basically made peace with your past, you've accepted things that you cannot change. So now, or at least like in part, you've accepted, things that like from the past perspective, you can't change. So if you still have an anxiety, then you're wanting to control the future, right? Like you're wanting to know what's going to happen. You're wanting things to play out the way that you want them to go, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is something like that I wrote about not too long ago, and this is going to probably sound a little bit counterintuitive to what you're thinking right now, but I think ultimately no one wants to control the future. No one wants to know what happens tomorrow, and as much as we fool ourselves into thinking we do, we don't want to know what comes next. Wouldn't it be really boring if you like have you ever watched watched a movie and then like you watch it again and then like you watch it a third time because somebody else wants to watch it with you. But by like the third, fourth, fifth time, you're getting pretty bored of this movie, right?
Yeah, I could hardly watch a movie the second time.
Right. So why would you want to know what comes tomorrow? Because that means you're never gonna have any kind of surprise in life. You're never gonna really do anything that you don't already think of ahead of time.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
I like surprises. Surprises are good.
So just like I can't say 100% certainly that I'll see you guys in Florida, I can't say that I'm not going to, and I can't really think of any reasons why I won't, but I mean, shit happens. Like we can't control the future. Uh I don't want to control the future, and as much as I'll make a conscious effort to be there, who knows what's going to happen.
So, can you talk more about the DBT? Is that dialectical behavior therapy?
Dialectic behavioral therapy kind of like incorporates some aspects of it feels kind of Buddhist to me, and a lot of the philosophies and like the schools of thought. Basically, like they focus on meditation, breathing exercises, mindfulness, learning how to control your thoughts and let go of them, so that you're to me, like, a lot of mindfulness is about learning to realize that you're not the thoughts in your head. You're not the voice that, you talk to yourself in your head. Basically, you're the person that's listening to it. So, like, if you can kind of like wrap your mind around that and realize that every time like a thought goes through your head, that doesn't mean it's you. It doesn't mean that that's like a defining principle of yourself. Like, you don't have to be reactionary based on those thoughts. Like once you can grasp that, and it's just kind of like becomes a background noise to me. Like thoughts go through my head all the time, but I don't feel any need to act on them or repeat them. It's just once you can become mindful of that and be in a more observing state, that's pretty much what DBT tries to teach you.
So it's not, so like the way I look at thoughts is that they turn into emotions. So in this sense, it's kind of catching the thought first and more of observing it, kind of like they're clouds passing by over your head. You're just observing them instead of becoming so emotionally attached to them.
Right, right. Like just realizing that a thought doesn't necessarily dictate reality. It So much of what we perceive as reality is based on our own assumptions and expectations. Like, have you ever heard somebody say like something like you don't love me, you have an idea of me?
Yeah.
Okay, so basically, what they're saying is you have all these assumptions and expectations of who you think I am, and that's who you're actually loving, and you can't really see. Sorry, you can't really see that I'm more dynamic than that. It's kind of like the way we can't ever really. I want to say you can't ever really like 100% know yourself either, because there's no way that you can know your own limitations, and to know someone else's is almost comical in comparison, because learning yourself and realizing, all the things that you have to let go of, and then to try to encapsulate another person into our own perspective of them is just like a very limiting mindset. Like, we have to always be able to realize that people are always drastically more than just our perception.
Right.
And that's another thing mindfulness does. It teaches to manage expectations, just like like say Shane brings you a box of Cheez-Its every day. Well, one day he doesn't bring you a box of Cheez-Its, and you've come to you expect that box of Cheez-Its every day. So whenever he doesn't bring a box of Cheez-Its, automatically that creates some kind of like anxiety. Okay, why didn't he bring me these Cheez-Its today?
It's so true. I was just talking to you about that the other week. And,
Right.
and that's where I realized I had a slight victim mindset. That I was relying on him too much. And so when he didn't do the thing that I was expecting, it turned into a victim mindset, where I could just go out and get the damn Cheez-Its myself. And I've been looking a lot about victim mindset, and it seems, like most things, it's say kind of on a spectrum, right? So you have a mild victim mindset, like, oh, I feel a little bit sorry for myself, and then you know on the other end of the spectrum, you have the toxic victim mindset, and that's where the phrase comes from: victims are violent, which is really interesting.
Right. And oh man, victim mentality. That is like a whole can of worms in itself, trying to escape victim mentality. I,
Mhm.
see. I don't feel like any of this is like something you can really. I mean, in my mind, I couldn't single out like one thing and work through it that way. Like, my journey to mindfulness encapsulated pretty much everything else along the way. Like, I had to stop assuming, I had to stop all the expectations I put on people, I had to stop putting unrealistic expectations on myself, I had to stop doing things that, like, I knew I didn't want to do, like letting go of things that don't make me happy. Um, yeah, so like victim mentality, learning to work through that, learning that everything isn't about me. Like, when somebody doesn't do something that like I expected them to do, or somebody says something that I disagree with or I take personal offense to, doesn't necessarily even mean it's about me. I mean, I feel like in some way everything that everybody does is actually about them. Like,
Right.
if you can start looking at it from that perspective, then it's a lot easier to not take everything personally.
Yeah. Yeah, because you know what? You are, as a human being, egocentrical. Is that a word? Egocentric in itself. So everything is about you, just like everything is about me. So when I'm making a decision or a choice, of course, the first thing I'm thinking about, because I exist, is me. So it's unlikely that the choice I'm making is trying to negatively affect someone else. So when you're taking offense about something that someone else said, you could just think, well, they probably weren't intentionally trying to offend me, right? 'Cause they're just really thinking about themselves.
Well, the way I look at it is this: even if they were intentionally trying to offend me, it's still really about them. Like, why do they feel the need to attack me? It's probably coming
Right.
from a place of feeling inferior or their own, sense of lack. Like they're trying to compensate for something.
Right. Yeah, that's a important lesson to learn, and it can be a hard one because it can seem kind of counterintuitive that someone who is bullying someone else or someone who's intentionally trying to attack someone else is really just doing it from a place of their own insecurity.
Right, and it doesn't really feel like that, being on the receiving end, it definitely feels like getting attacked, but
Right.
the whole this is one of those woo concepts. So might as well go ahead and jump into it. Like,
It's it's woo time.
one of the things that like helped me work through a lot of my issues and like a lot of my own like mental blocks is I look at everyone as a reflection of myself because from the way our minds work, that really is what everyone else is. Like you can't ever 100% know another person just from your interactions with them. Like you don't know what's going on in their mind. You don't know what they do whenever they're not with you. You don't know. It's not really up to you to know all of that about another person because you have to focus on yourself. If you
Right.
get like obsessed, then you're gonna be following the other person around, or you're gonna be making crazy accusations. You're gonna be accusing them of shit that's probably not even grounded in reality, but like in your mind, you create scenarios, and like the more you start, kind of playing them out in your head, the more real they become, and eventually the other person is whatever you think they are. So that falls back into that whole idea of a person.
Yeah. Yeah. So, can you give
Yeah.
examples of like mindfulness? Like what's a sort of exercise that you
Well,
could do?
Jakey Brown just said, most people secure in themselves don't like feel a need to attack anyone else. Um, Mindfulness is basically being enough for yourself. Like you're not looking externally for someone to, what's a good word here? Balance you out, like, placate you, compensate for something you feel you're lacking. Like, people that have suffered with like addiction, things like that, will probably understand like that empty hole that like you're always trying to fill.
Hmm.
So I mean, like it doesn't matter how much whatever you stuff in that like little hole you fill inside yourself. It never goes away, and like over time, it's gonna keep growing and getting bigger. Well, the only thing I ever found that'll actually fill that hole is just, loving yourself because that's ultimately what you're looking for. Is you're looking for attention, you're looking for love, you're looking for something external to fill something that you feel is missing internal. And nothing external is ever gonna compensate for your own ability to be enough for yourself.
Right. I went through that um, at a very young age, around uh, early 20s, and it took someone ending a relationship with me to realize that. Being early 20s, we couldn't really articulate it, what that exact problem was. Not the people that are in their early 20s are stupid, but I mean, just like, emotional maturity and stuff, so, but I realized that I was relying on this person too much for my own happiness. So that's when I focused on myself and I got a studio, I got a cat, and it changed my life. But I still feel that I go, like I'm very fulfilled in my life. I'm probably the happiest now that I've ever been. But I still go through that emptiness. I do have a background with addiction, so I understand the empty hole. And it's not so much that I have an empty hole of like I'm lacking happiness. It's more like a fear hole. With this whole anxiety thing, like I get scared, and so the hole is fear based, and I'm looking to for something to calm it, and that's where I feel like I rely on shame too much, almost like an energy vampire, or what they would call like a psychic vampire, um, where it's almost like I reach out and touch to him, and touch his arm and just be like, is everything going to be okay? you know, and he's like, yes, everything's okay.
You know,
It's it's exhausting.
that's very interesting because you're becoming aware of something, and I'll touch on that in just a second. I just want to remind everybody we're here on MSP Waves. You can join us in the Discord app in the audience chat room. We've got a few people here today. We've got Nomad Soul, Sound Waves, Yidness, Zo, Ni, Cheek. I'm trying to remember how Krim told me to pronounce it. Pundito, Moonshine, Mino, Jesse's here, Jakey Brown. Thanks for coming out. And we've got Crimson here too. And of course, we're being joined by Azaria, our local resident cat. And probably the best cat we've ever had.
And she's an addict.
Yes, that's true. She has fully embraced her cheese addiction. She's working on it, and that's what we're doing here today. We're helping her get through her cheese addiction. Okay, so this is what I was gonna touch on. Whenever you can notice like your interactions with another person and know whether or not they're coming from like a place of fear or a place of love, then I think you're getting to that point where you can start to see yourself as possibly the this might sound bad, but like I think everybody needs to get to that point in mindfulness where they can realize that sometimes they're the bad guy. Like sometimes I'm using someone else.
Hmm.
Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that what you're doing is wrong or you shouldn't do it because I mean like that's we all interact with each other in certain ways and we're all like a lot of my journey is considering we're all one, like we're all here to interact with each other. We're here to be catalysts for each other and it's never perfectly balanced when we interact with another. There's some give, there's some take, and balance is basically what goes on in between that give and take. And the more we learn to balance it, the more harmonious our relationships with others will be. But just like if you can see something you do as being like that fear based, like feeding sort of attachment, then what you should be able to do is realize that there's also something on the opposite end of the coin that basically you're being used in that same way. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing, but it's kind of like you have to be able to realize people are balancing each other out, right? Like, if you feel like you're feeding off of someone else's positivity, then you gotta like be able to look and say like, okay, well, where are they feeding off my negativity? You know.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. But sometimes I do know it gets to, like what Menno says, maybe he has a hardened emotional skin due to the blame shame game. But I think, there are times where it does get to him and I feel bad. There's only so much, you can take sometimes. And yeah. I'm kind of a neurotic mess, and he is the complete opposite of that. He's like
Well, you,
kind of like
you,
happy go lucky.
you know, it's kind of funny because, just like what you just said, I mean, I don't, me and Shade actually have a lot of similarities. And it seems like generally my relationships are, like people that even like if I'm just friends with them, they tend to be more, I guess, like more along like the negative mindset from like my perspective. But like at the same time, I recognize that like my need is always to try to help and not necessarily like fix people, but it's always kind of like a pull to want to be able to assist others and like like that's something that I guess you could say like fuels me. Like I need that sense of being useful to the world, I guess you could say. So
Yeah, I understand that.
so like if you can say that like you're feeding on his positivity and his like whole happy go lucky kind of mindset, then I'm willing to bet like underneath that he's probably got like a similar situation going on where he feels like pulled into that life of service and needing to help others and basically it's really about grounding, because if people just run around being carefree and never focusing their energy in towards doing anything positive, then I mean it feels pointless after a while. And
Yeah,
well, right, I mean like that's when I start getting not probably not depressed, but like I'll start getting anxious. Like like what am I doing with my life? Does any of it matter? Am I going to?
oh man, that just reminded me of that video that you posted. Or was it, what the hell was that? It wasn't your post, it was someone else's post, and maybe you resteamed it. It was the guy talking about that life is kind of like an existential crisis, and that there is no, like, what people are labeling as depression and anxiety is really just living in this world and acknowledging the world. Wasn't that you that was that one of your philosophy picks?
That sounds. I think that might have been last week.
Yeah.
But yeah. I mean, if if you realize that the only thing that ever really exists is the moment that you're in, then basically whenever you're looking in towards the past, that's when you can get caught in depression. It's basically like yourself not accepting something that's already happened. You're playing it through in your mind, like, well, what if this would have happened? What if I can change it by doing this? The whole thing is like, at some point, you have to become mindful of the fact that you can't change the past. You have to accept the things that you cannot change. Like if you can accept that you have zero power to change anything that already happened, and it's basically just what got you to the point that you're at, then there's really no reason to be depressed about it. And it works the same way with anxiety going forward. If you can accept that you don't necessarily control the future, you don't dictate what the price of Bitcoin is going to be tomorrow, or things like that, then it's about not worrying about things outside of your control.
Yep, that's the thing that I have to work on.
And hey, Zipporah, I see you. Thanks for coming out.
Zippy.
And it's funny because like I was going to curate her post and I'm sitting there reading it and I'm like, damn, this is a really good post. And I'm looking at it and I'm like, hold on, that theme sounds really familiar. And then it was just like Zippy. Because like I remembered when she was doing that interview with Agrod.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's who this is. So like I had to go find her and ask if I could use her picture and everything. But yeah, that's a really awesome post. You guys should check that out.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, I'm currently in this state where I'm just a frazzled mess, but I do understand, like, I want to help people too. And I think that's why I'm always, on trying to help people um, on Steam it. But, like, I also want to help them, emotionally. But, it's hard to do that when you feel like a mess yourself. But yeah, I have the need for service as well. And I guess that's why I'm a teacher. But
Well, I mean, I know what you're talking about in that respect too. I've always kind of like I really think it's part of just being a human being. It's like even this is gonna sound counterintuitive, but like I mean I really feel like even those people that are like what you would probably consider like the worst people or whatever, like the ones that you just think are just out to use everyone and like don't really care about other people. I really think like if you could see from their perspective, they probably see what they're doing as in some way helping people. I think everybody wants to, at like the core of their being, be perceived as a good person and doing something beneficial to society and the world at large. But we all have different perspectives of how we go about that. Like, say, I want to be a good person and a good member of society, but I don't believe in the way the government goes about it. So a lot of people would like look negatively upon that as, well, why don't you like the government? They're just here to protect us. And I'm like, we can disagree about that, but at the same time, I still, want to help people and see us basically advance as a race and, be able to take care of ourselves in the future and become a more sustainable world. So, whenever you look at people that are, just like raking in oil profits or controlling the stock market and things like that, maybe, I mean, I know some people just are in that fear based greed mindset, but they're still rationalizing it some kind of way in their mind to where they're not like the bad person. Like even if their mindset is like this is how people do things, so I have to be, the same way to be on a level playing field. I think that's where a lot of that comes from. And if we can get past that scarcity mindset that there's not enough for everyone, then we can start looking at different ways and educating more people to actually create like real lasting change in the world.
yeah, scarcity mindset is something I've been um, working with for a while now to try to move toward a more abundance mindset. Oh, did we drop the frame?
Um, we're off.
Can you hear us?
Oh, apparently Unowisp has a show.
Oh,
I thought Uni's show was on Thursday. Okay, well, I guess our show is getting cut a little early today, and we will get this better planned out next week.
all right, cool. Coffee and philosophy with Claiborne.
Hey, thanks for joining me, Isaria.
Thank you.